Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hi everyone, this is Mallika Pathak from Miranda House, University of Delhi, continuing with the course on conductance for the students of BSc Honours Chemistry and BSc with Chemistry. This is Module 9, Lecture 2 of the series. The academic expert of the course is Dr. Amrita T. Sheikh, and the recording is being done under the DTH Swayam Prabha project of the MHRD, New Delhi. Now let's recall what we did in the previous e-lecture. In the previous lecture, we looked at what are the factors which influence molar conductivities. We studied the variation of molar conductivity for alkali metal ions. Then we also looked at why we have abnormal values of molar conductivity for H plus and OH minus ions. We studied the Groth's mechanism, which explains this abnormal transference number or a transport number or the ionic mobility of H plus and OH minus ions. We looked at some terms like ionic speed, ionic mobility and transport number, and studied the relationship between all these three. Now in today's class, we are going to study one of the most important methods for the determination of transport number, that is called as Hittorf's method. But before we do that, let's recall what is transport number. So we'll start with the recapitulation of transport number, followed by a discussion on what is Hittorf's method and how it can be used to find out the value of transport number. Now, what is a transport number? It is the fraction of the total current carried by an ion. So, if you have a cation or if you have an anion, the transport number of the cation will be equal to I plus the current carried by the cation upon the total current. T minus the transport number of the anion will be equal to I minus upon I, which is the current carried by the anion upon the total current. So, this is what is called as transport number. And this transport number is directly proportional to the speed of migration of the ion. So if you take a ratio of the transport numbers of cation to the anion, you will find that it is equal to the ionic speeds of the cation to the anion. So T plus upon T minus is equal to U plus upon U minus, which is equivalent to that T is directly proportional to speed. Now, because we know that the transport numbers are fraction of the total current carried by an ion, this sum, the transport number of the cation to the transport number of the anion, should always be equal to 1. So, if you determine the value of 1 transport number of the cation or the anion, then the other can be determined by just subtracting the value of the cation or the anion from 1 to get the transport number of the other one. This transport number, I have to remind you that this is also called as transference number or Hittorf's number. Now there are various methods for the measurement of transport number, but in your syllabus there are only two methods. One is Hittorf's method, the other is a moving boundary method. In today's e-lecture we are studying what is called as Hittorf's method for the determination of transport number of ions. This method was given in 1853 by Hittorf. And why was it given? It was given because we know that most of the ions differ largely in their mobility, yet always and always equal number of the ions are discharged at electrodes on electrolysis. Now this anomaly has been explained by Hittorf by means of a theoretical device. What is the anomaly? That although the speed of the ions differ a lot, the cations will move at a different speed and the anions will move at a different speed, yet always and always equal number of the cations and the anions are discharged on electrolysis at the electrodes. But before we do that, let's recall some of the points about electrolysis. The total current can be measured directly, but we cannot measure the value of I minus or I plus directly from the experiment. That is, we cannot measure the current just carried by the anion or the current just carried by the cation. we are able to calculate the sum of the I minus plus I plus, but we cannot do the individual values of I minus or I plus. When the current is passed through the solution, the following changes occur during the electrolysis. The ions of the electrolysis migrate towards opposite charged electrodes, that is, anion towards anode, cations towards cathode. Anions are, what do we know about anions? They are negatively charged and they will move towards anode, which is positively charged. Cations, which are positively charged, will move towards cathode, which is negatively charged. And when they move, they carry the current through the solution. These ions get discharged on the oppositely charged electrode. See, anions will be discharged at anode and cations will be discharged at cathode. Due to the electrolysis and the migration of the ions, the concentration changes occur in the vicinity of electrodes. This change is related to the transport number of the ions. So what are we saying? That because the electrolysis is taking place, the migration of the ions is taking place, there will be concentration changes taking place at the electrodes. And this change is related to the transport number of the ions. So let's look at the method. Now this is the experimental setup for the determination of transport number using Hittorf's method. So this is the experimental setup. We are going to talk about this experimental setup later after we have looked at the Hittorf's theoretical device. But this is the device that is used for determination of transport number. Now Hittorf's method is based on the Hittorf's rule, and which says that the loss of concentration around any electrode is proportional to the speed of the ion moving away from that electrode. I'm repeating, it says the loss of concentration around any electrode is proportional to the speed of the ion moving away from that electrode. So if you want to calculate the transport number, you need to see the changes in concentration around the electrode experimentally. Now let's look at the Hittorf's theoretical device. This was a device which was proposed by Hittorf for explaining the Hittorf's rule and thus the determination of transport number. It consists of two metal electrodes. So we have A plus and B minus. This is the positive electrode, which is the anode. This is the negative electrode, which is the cathode. The theoretical device is divided into three compartments. You have an anodic compartment, a central compartment, and a cathodic compartment. This is done by the use of imaginary partitions. So there is an imaginary partition called C, and there is an imaginary partition called D. And this divides the whole device into three compartments: cathodic, central, and anodic compartments. Now, let us suppose that before the electrolysis, this is the position of the device, and you have 8 pairs of cations and anions in each of the compartments. So the first case, just see the first number. This first number tells you that this is the case when initially you took a theoretical device and there are 8 pairs of cations and anions in each of the 3 compartments. I am repeating, this is a theoretical device to explain the determination of transport number. It has 3 compartments: anodic, central, and cathodic compartment. They are divided by the use of imaginary partitions, and these partitions are permeable to the ions. That means the ions can move from one compartment to the other through the imaginary planes. Then let us suppose that before the electrolysis you have 8 pairs of cations and anions in each of the 3 compartments. Now let us take a case where only cations were capable of movement. We are taking a case, I am reminding it is a case where cations are only capable of movement. And let us suppose that 2 of the cations move towards cathode. So where are the cations? We are assuming that 2 cations are moving. So we know that the cations move towards the cathode. And from where will they move? They move from the anodic compartment. So let us assume 2 cations from the anodic compartment move to the central. 2 cations from the central move to the cathode. This has happened because we applied the potential. So if we apply the potential and there are only cations which are capable of moving, and we assume that only 2 cations move, So the two cations are moving towards the cathode. So where are they moving from? They are moving from anode. So two cations from the anodic compartment have moved to the central, and the two cations from the central have moved to the cathodic compartment. So now just see how many cations are left in the anodic compartment. You have 6 cations left in the anodic compartment. Now in the central compartment, the two cations came into the central compartment from the anode and they moved out to the cathodic compartment. But the number of cations remain the same. So the loss of the cation does not take place in the central compartment because 2 came from the anode and then 2 moved to the cathode. So the central compartment has same number of cations as they were there. But in the cathodic compartment, you have 2 extra cations. Now we know that always and always unpaired ions are discharged at the electrodes. Now just see how many unpaired ions are left in the cathodic compartment, because 2 cations came from anode to the central to the cathodic compartments. You have 2 extra cations. That means these 2 cations are there and these 2 cations are discharged at the cathode. Now look at the anodic compartment. Because 2 anions had moved out from the anodic compartment, you have 2 extra anions left in the anodic compartment. And what is the rule for electrolysis? That the unpaired ions are discharged at the electrodes. So although only 2 cations moved from anode to the central to the cathode, you had 2 cations left in the cathodic compartments which are unpaired. But because there was a movement of cations, you have 2 anions left unpaired at the anodic compartment. So unpaired ions are discharged at the electrode. So 2 cations will be discharged at cathode and 2 anions will be discharged at anode. This is happening only and only when the cations are moving. Similarly, if you were to take a case that only anions were capable of movement, then let's say 3 anions move from cathodic to central to the anodic. Now if 3 anions move from the cathodic to the central to the anodic and no cations have moved, then there will be a loss of 3 anions at the cathodic compartment and there will be a gain of 3 anions at the anodic compartment. The central compartment will remain the same because it receives and then allows the movement. Now because there will be extra 3 anions in the anodic compartment and 3 cations extra in the cathodic compartment, therefore 3 cations will be discharged at cathode and 3 anions will be discharged at anode. So whether the cation only moved or whether the anion only moved, but the number of ions discharged at the electrodes, the respective electrodes, cations at the cathode and anions at the anode, are always the same. This is we are studying a case where only either the cations or the anions are capable of movement. Now let's take the third case where both anions and cations can move and they move at the same speed. Let us take a case where 2 anions move towards the anode and 2 cations move towards the cathode. Now 2 anions are moving towards the anode from the cathodic to the central to the anodic compartment and 2 cations are moving from the anodic to the central to the cathodic compartment. When this kind of movement is taking place, then because there were 2 cations moving and 2 anions moving, you have 4 unpaired cations left at the cathodic compartment and 4 unpaired anions left at the anodic compartment. Now because you have 4 unpaired cations and 4 unpaired anions, and we know that the unpaired ions are discharged at the respective electrode, therefore we see that although only 2 cations and 2 anions move, but there are 4 cations discharged at the electrode and 4 anions discharged at the electrode. So 4 cations at the cathode and 4 anions at the anode. Now let's study a case where the cations and the anions move with different speed. In this case, let us assume that 2 cations are moving towards the cathode and 3 anions are moving towards the anode. The first case, we are doing it with respect to the first case only, please. So you have 8 cation pairs and anion pairs in the cathodic, 8 anion cation pairs in the central, 8 anion cation pairs in the anodic compartment. Now what are we saying? We are saying 2 cations move towards the cathode. So 2 cations from the anodic to the central to the cathodic. So 2 anions will be left unpaired in the anode and 2 cations will become unpaired at the cathode when only 2 cations move. But because there is also simultaneous movement of the three anions are moving from the cathode to the central and 3 to the anodic. So now how many are left unpaired? You have 5 unpaired cations left at the cathodic compartment, and you have 5 unpaired anions left at the anodic compartment. There was movement which was different. 2 cations moved and 3 anions moved, but the number of unpaired ions in both the compartment is same. 5 unpaired cations and 5 unpaired anions. And because we know that the unpaired ions are discharged at the electrodes, therefore 5 cations at the cathode and 5 anions at the anode are discharged. So from this, what is obvious is that ions may have different speed, but there will be always an equivalent amount of the cation or anion which will be discharged on the opposite electrode. So just recapitulate what we have just studied. From the Hittov's theoretical device, it is evident that the number of ions discharged at each electrode depends on the sum of the speeds or the mobilities of the two ions. In the first case, that is case 2, when 2 cations could move in a given time, the number of ions discharged at each electrode was also 2. In the last case, which we called as case 4, when 2 cations and 3 anions moved in a given time, the number of ions discharged at each electrode was equal to 5. So, what are we saying? Whether the speed of the ions is same or it is different, equivalent amount of ions are discharged at the opposite electrode. Now, according to the Faraday's first law of electrolysis, the number of ions discharged at each electrode is proportional to the total quantity of electricity passed through the solution. I am repeating. It says the number of ions discharged at each electrode is proportional to the total quantity of electricity passed through the solution. Therefore, total quantity of electricity that passes through the solution will be proportional to the sum of the mobilities of the ions, and the quantity of electricity which will be carried by a particular ion will be proportional to the mobility of that particular ion. We have already done this in the previous lecture, where we said that the transport number was proportional to the speed of the ion, and we were relating it to it. So I plus T plus is equal to I plus upon I, which was equal to U plus upon U plus U minus, and T minus was equal to I minus upon I, which was equal to U minus upon U plus U minus. So the total quantity of electricity that passes through the solution is proportional to the sum of the mobilities of the ions. The quantity of electricity carried by a particular ion is proportional to the mobility of that particular ion. Now we know that transport number is equal to the fraction of the total current carried by an ion. So transport number of the cation is equal to current carried by the cation upon total current, which is equal to U plus upon U plus U minus. Transport number of the anion T minus is equal to current carried by the anion upon total current, which is equal to U minus upon U plus U minus. Therefore, T plus T minus is equal to 1. So, by means of Hittov's theoretical device, it is possible to show that mobility of the cation upon mobility of the anion is equal to fall of concentration around the anode and fall of concentration around the cathode. I am repeating. So, mobility of the cation is proportional to the concentration changes that are taking place at anode. Mobility of the anion is proportional to the concentration changes taking place at the cathode. So, mobility of the cation upon mobility of the anion is equal to fall of concentration around anode, fall of concentration around cathode. And now let us try and understand with respect to the Hittov's theoretical device. In the last case, we discussed 2 cations had moved towards the cathode and 3 anions had moved towards the anode. So, the mobility of the cation was 2 and mobility of the anion was 3. So, mobility of the cation upon mobility of the anion was equal to 2 upon 3. So, this is the ratio. So, the ratio of the mobility of the cation to the mobility of the anion was equal to 2 by 3. Now, from the Hittov's theoretical device, the concentration changes around anode and cathode are also changing. So, the fall of concentration around anode was what? 2, because 2 cations had moved from the anode to the cathode, and around the cathode it was 3. There were 3 anions which moved from the cathode towards the anode. So, fall of concentration around anode upon fall of concentration around cathode was also equal to 2 by 3. So, both were equal. So whether you determine the ratio of the mobility, or whether you determine the mobility of the cation, mobility of the cation to the mobility of the anion, or whether you determine fall of concentration around anode to the fall of concentration around cathode, the values will come out to be the same. So essentially what Hittov's method is actually telling you is that concentration changes which occur in the vicinity of the electrodes will give you the value of transport number. So transport number of the cation, which was equal to U plus upon U plus plus U minus, is actually equal to fall of concentration around anode upon fall of concentration around anode plus fall of concentration around cathode. Therefore, T plus can be written as fall of concentration around anode upon total fall in concentration. And if we are measuring the concentration in terms of mole, we can write number of moles lost from the anodic compartment upon total number of moles lost from both the compartments. So whether you do it in terms of mobility, whether you do it in terms of concentration changes, the transport number can be determined. And Hittov's method allows you to determine this using the concentration changes at the electrode. So if I want to find out the transport number of the cation, I need to measure the concentration changes occurring in the anodic compartment. So fall of concentration around anode upon total fall in concentration will give me the transport number of the cation. Similarly, transport number of the anion will be equal to fall in concentration around cathode upon total fall in concentration. So but the total number of moles lost from both the compartments is equal to the number of moles deposited on each electrode. So जितना भी loss हुआ था from both the compartments, that is equal to the number of moles deposited on each electrode. So number of moles lost from the anodic compartment upon number of moles deposited on each electrode will give you the transport number. Now since according to the Faraday's second law, the number of moles deposited on each electrode must be equal to the number of moles of copper deposited in a copper coulometer by the same quantity of electricity, it is more convenient to use a copper coulometer in series with the experimental solution and to find out the mass of the copper deposited on the cathode. So T plus will be equal to number of lost moles from the anodic compartment upon number of moles of copper deposited in a coulometer. So coulometer is used to measure the current in terms of copper deposited on the copper electrode or silver deposited in the silver coulometer. But here we are taking copper coulometer. So number of moles lost from the anodic compartment upon number of moles of copper deposited in the copper coulometer, which is placed in series with the Hittov's experimental setup, will give me the transport number of the cation. So transport number of the cation can be determined by this method. It can also be determined in terms of gram equivalents, number of gram equivalents lost from the anodic compartment upon number of gram equivalents of copper deposited in the coulometer. If we know the transport number of the cation or the anion, we can determine the other because T plus plus T minus is always equal to. In deriving the above relation, an important assumption has been made. Namely, the discharged ions do not react with the material of the electrodes. However, in many cases, they combine with the material of the electrodes rather than depositing on it. This results in an increase in the concentration around such an electrode instead of a decrease. Now let's look at the experimental setup for the determination of transport number. So this experimental setup consists of two vertical glass tubes which act as the anodic and the cathodic compartment. They are connected to a U-tube which is also made of glass. All the three compartments have stopcock through which the solution can be taken out and the concentration changes can be monitored. The mass and the concentration of the electrolyte in each patient are measured at the end of the experiment. Knowing the original concentration, we can calculate the changes in the amount of electrolyte in each compartment. Analysis of the middle compartment is used as a check to determine if any interfering effects have occurred. The change in the amount of the electrolyte in each of the compartments, the anodic and the cathodic compartment, can be related to the transport number of the ions by the procedure which was given earlier. We did talk about the coulometer. So the coulometer is put in series with this experimental setup. You can use a silver coulometer or you can use a copper coulometer. the Hittov's method is subject to many practical difficulties. If you pass the current for a very long amount of time, then convection is taking place. The heating effects are unevenly spread out. Because of that convection, the concentration changes are taking place. The diffusion sets in. The solution or the electrolyte starts moving from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So besides the electrolytic effects that are taking place, you will also have diffusion and the convection effects taking place. But if you pass for a very short amount of time, then the concentration changes may not be large enough for it to be measured. So we have to avoid these two problems: not too long, not too short. Now let's see how we study the concentration changes in the Hittov's experimental setup. Here, since the changes in the concentration of the solution result in changes in the density and volume, the change of concentration must be determined with reference to a definite mass of the solvent. Therefore, estimations have to be made with respect to a known mass of the solvent and not with a known volume of the solution. And this has to be done before and after the electrolysis. Now let's consider this electrolysis of copper sulfate using copper electrodes. Let us say that a mass A of the cathodic solution is taken after electrolysis and contains the mass B of copper sulfate. So after electrolysis, you took out the cathodic solution from the stopcock and you measured the mass B of copper sulfate in that cathodic solution. Now the solution mass was A, the mass of copper sulfate was B, so the mass of water in this solution will be what? A minus B. So this is after electrolysis. Let us suppose that the mass C of the solution before electrolysis contained mass D of copper sulfate. So after electrolysis, you took A mass of the cathodic solution and it contained B mass of copper sulfate. So the water was A minus B. Now you had done the experiment before also, so you were analyzing the concentration before also, and before the electrolysis the mass C of the solution contained mass D of copper sulfate. Now we will determine the mass of copper sulfate in the solution with respect to A minus B of the water. So the mass of water in the solution that was taken after electrolysis is C minus D, because C is the mass of the solution, D is the mass of copper sulfate. Now what is the mass of copper sulfate in A minus B of the solvent? So we are saying we are comparing with respect to a definite mass of the solvent. The definite mass of the solvent that we are taking is that which had come out after electrolysis, which was A minus B. So in C minus D of the water, you had D of the copper sulfate. So in A minus B, how much will be there? Unitary method. C minus D had D, so in A minus B it will be D into A minus B upon C minus D. So now the amount is number of moles. So the number of moles of copper sulfate before electrolysis is mass upon molar mass. So you get D into A minus B upon C minus D divided by molar mass of copper sulfate. So you get the value of X. This is before electrolysis. Now what about the after electrolysis? The after electrolysis value was B. Now B was the mass of the copper sulfate, and this was present in how much of the? It was present in A minus B. So you divide it by molar mass of the copper sulfate. So you've got the value of Y. Now what is the decrease in the amount of copper sulfate in the cathodic compartment? It was X minus Y. Now if in the coulometer the mass M of the silver is deposited, we are taking a silver coulometer, then the total amount of electrons which will be passed will be mass upon molar mass of Ag. That will be giving you Z, the amount of silver deposited, which correspond to the amount of electrons passed. So what will be the transport number? Transport number will be equal to the loss in the amount of copper sulfate in the cathodic compartment upon amount of electrons passed. We had already talked about this, which was X minus Y upon Z. So you can find out the transport number by checking the difference in the concentration which are taking place at the electrode upon the amount of electrons passed. Now let us study and understand this with respect to a numerical, so that our understanding is not just theoretical. We have to understand how this experiment is performed. In an electrolysis of copper sulfate between copper electrodes, the total mass of copper deposited at the electrodes was 0.153 gram, and the masses of copper per unit volume of the anode liquid before and after electrolysis were 0.79 and 0.91 grams. Calculate the transport number of the copper 2 plus and SO4 2 minus ions. Very simple, let's try and understand. You are given that the weight of copper in the anode liquid before electrolysis is 0.79. Weight of the copper in the anode liquid after electrolysis is 0.91. So what is the concentration change? You have 0.91 minus 0.79. So you get 0.12 gram. Now increase of the copper cathode in the coulometer. Now in the coulometer you had 1.153 grams of copper deposited. So that means if no migration had taken place of copper, then the increase in the weight would have been 0.153, because we know according to Faraday's first law, what is it? The concentration changes at the electrodes are proportional to the amount of electricity passed. The amount of electricity passed corresponds to the amount of copper deposited in the coulometer. So the changes should have been corresponding to 0.153, but actual increase that you see is 0.12 grams. So fall in concentration due to migration of CO2 plus ions will be 0.153 minus 0.12. What is the change? The change is 0.153 minus 0.133. So the transport number of copper 2 plus ions will come out to be 0.033 upon 0.153, which will be equal to 0.215. And what will be the transport number of sulfate ions? Will be just subtracting the transport number of copper 2 plus ions. Let's take another look at another numerical. We are given a decinormal solution of silver nitrate which was electrolyzed between platinum electrodes. After passing a small current for 2 hours, a fall of concentration of this much gram equivalent occurred in the anodic solution. The mass of copper deposited in the copper coulometer placed in series was found to be 0.03879 grams. Now calculate the transport number of silver and nitrate ions in silver nitrate. You know that the equivalent mass of copper is 31.8. Now let's see. What is the falling concentration around anode? You see that it has been given as 0.005124 gram equivalent. Now what is the mass of copper deposited in the copper coulometer? 0.03879 gram. So what is the gram equivalent of copper deposited in the coulometer? This will be this divided by the equivalent mass. So you get this much gram equivalent of copper was deposited in the coulometer. So if I want to find out the transport number, gram equivalent lost from the anodic compartment upon gram equivalent of copper deposited in the coulometer. We are given the gram equivalent lost from the anodic compartment. We have calculated the value of gram equivalent copper deposited in the coulometer, and we get the value of transport number. This transport number can be then used to calculate the transport number of the anion, which will be equal to 1 minus transport number of the cation, and therefore this value. So this way you can find out the transport number using Hittorf's method. With this we wind up today's e-lecture. Today what we studied was that we recalled what was transport number. How do we use Hittorf method for the determination of transport number of ions? We looked at its theoretical device, we looked at the experimental setup, and then we took a look at 2 numericals for a better understanding. Now, in the next lecture, we are going to again revisit Hittorf's method using 2 numericals so that our understanding is much more clearer. Then we will take a look at the moving boundary method for the determination of transport number. So with this, thank you so much for your kind attention. Please be safe at home. Take care of yourself and your family. Regards. Bye-bye.